This is the OnePlus 7T. I recently did a video basically stating my first impressions and thoughts on this phone, but now I'm doing an in-depth review. OnePlus 7T was released back in 2019, which is almost 5 years ago. Kind of crazy to think about because at the time, Carl Pei was still at OnePlus and the company was really thriving. Honestly, everything was going pretty well for them. OnePlus was generally seen as the main flagship killer brand. However, even though they're making, I'm sure, plenty of money, they're really not respected as much by the OnePlus community and just overall the smartphone community. Recently, OnePlus has implemented a lot of changes to their brand. From switching from base Oxygen OS, which was almost like stock Android, to now almost being a copy of ColorOS. And they're also not pricing their phones as flagship killers really anymore. Sure, you can say phones like the OnePlus Ace, or maybe some Nord or CE phones being flagship killers, but their main lineup is no longer considered that. So today, I'm gonna be reviewing a phone that at the time was seen as a flagship killer, where OnePlus was really seen at its best, and how it holds up almost 5 years later. So let's get started with this review. Something that I think really aged well is the design. You've got a beautiful frosted glass back, as well as, in my opinion, a pretty nice camera ring, even though a lot of people didn't like it. I personally like it a lot. It actually helps you rest your hand if you're holding your phone, so I think that's a really good thing about the OnePlus's back design. In terms of the sides, we got USB-C, as well as dual stereo speakers, and a mute switch and a power button. This used to be something that was seen as common with OnePlus phones, but nowadays it's sort of in the middle. There are a lot of OnePlus budget phones that will not use the ringer at all, and then occasionally there will be some flagship phones or some other phones in OnePlus's brand that will actually have the ringer. So they're sort of having identity crisis with this whole ringer thing. Either way though, that's just my opinion, and overall, I think that this design is fantastic. We also got glass on the front, like every other smartphone since about 10 years ago. But yeah, even though I think for a lot of people this was a polarizing design, honestly, I really like it a lot. I don't have too many complaints with it, and I'm pretty satisfied with the design. Now, moving on to the display, we've got a 6.5-inch Full HD 90Hz display. It's a flat panel, so you generally won't have any accidental touches. And even though, yes, there is no pop-up camera, which is unfortunate for the 7T, you do have a pretty small water drop notch. The display is relatively bright. It's actually generally sometimes brighter than my iPhone 14 Plus, which you really wouldn't expect because from something that was released about 5 years ago compared to something that was released 1 year ago, and this was a flagship killer, while the 14 Plus is generally seen as essentially a flagship. So yeah, the fact that it's competing with basically phones from even today is really impressive and really shows how timeless not only the design is, but also this display. Now let's talk about performance in gaming. We got a Snapdragon 855 Plus with 8 GB of RAM and 128 GB of storage. Now, I know that 128 GB of storage is not too much for today's standards, but honestly, it's totally usable, and for most people, as long as you're not taking a billion photos every single day and not syncing up to any kind of cloud service, then you'll be totally fine. So similar to the impressions video, I'm gonna break it down into a couple of things. First, the UI performance. Second, the day-to-day performance. And then third, the gaming performance. Now I know that I did talk a decent about all of these things, but I'm gonna go more in depth into this. So starting off with the UI performance, it is really fluid. No matter what, it always stays in 90 Hz, and swiping over to the Google feed, which can occasionally be a pretty big problem for a lot of older Android smartphones, but even Android smartphones today that are mid-range will generally actually have a problem with swiping over to the Google feed in terms of lag or an FPS drop. With the 7T, you got no such thing. It is smooth and there is really no problems with that. In terms of just the overall UI performance, going through apps, scrolling through just the overall UI, it is really speedy. Going through previous apps are no problem at all. And if you want to open up new ones, then it'll take no time. Another thing that I really like is that on the UI, we have these live wallpapers, which is really nice to see. And somehow, even with the live wallpapers and a 5-year-old chip, it still performs really well. Now let's move on to the day-to-day. So let's go into the Play Store and let's just scroll around. Let's see how fast everything loads. And as you can tell, there is literally no lag. There's no problems at all. Clicking on different apps to install and see Amazon Shopping, something like that. It literally takes no time, but that's just one test. Let's search something on Google. So let's go onto apple.com and let's click here and see how it is. Okay, so as you can see, it basically immediately loaded up. Clicking on iPhone 16, learn more. Wow, this is another level of fast. I mean, it is just speedy, no problems at all. Look at that, that is just impressive. We can go to, Apple in Business. Let's just click that. As you can see, immediately loads up. You can surprise this with anything that you want to click on and it will immediately load it up. No problems at all. Another thing with day-to-day performance, let's open up that camera and let's see how fast it loads. Wow, that is really fast. I mean, that is basically as fast as any current Android smartphone or iPhone right now. Let's try to take a photo and let's see the loading time. So taking a photo, there we go, and it's loading in, but there you go. That is fast. Let's try to load up a YouTube video. So let's see here, we got MKBHD, and let's also do a speaker test.
There's two types of people in this world. Either AirPods fit in your ears, or AirPods don't fit in your ears.
And
there's two types of people in this world. You either love silicon tip in earbuds,
right now it's in 480p.
Or you hate silicon
and there we
tip
go. There was a tiny bit of a delay, but overall, it is very speedy. I'm gonna also talk about the speaker performance. The speaker performance is pretty good, but it doesn't match up to current Android or iPhone standards. Here's what I mean by that. Basically, yes, it is stereo speakers, and that may seem like basically as long as it has stereo speakers, then it's probably pretty good in terms of that. Unfortunately, that's not the only things that make a speaker great. You also just need good sound quality. Yes, the OnePlus 7T does have okay speaker quality, but here's what I noticed. When you have it at full volume, it does kind of distort a little bit. And no, it's not because there's dust or anything in my speakers. As you can see, they are completely clean. Another thing you'll notice is that the speakers are quite tinny. They don't sound very full. They sound just okay. So I guess if you want okay speakers and just basically just good enough, especially for this price, which I'm going to talk about later, then sure, these are definitely perfectly acceptable. Unfortunately, compared to my iPhone 14 Plus, it is nowhere near as good. All right, we sort of sidetracked from the overall just performance of the phone, so let's move on to the final section, which is the gaming performance. The gaming performance, and I said this in the impressions, are actually really good. When I first loaded up Call of Duty Warzone, I was kind of surprised at first because I noticed that there was a lot of FPS lag and it was not 60 FPS. It seemed like it was almost capped at 30. Luckily, there was really no reason to fear, generally because when I did actually go into the settings, it was just automatically all set to low. And then when I set it up to basically all high, it was running essentially perfectly. However, I'm going to clarify something from my impressions video. No, it doesn't run at a smooth 60 FPS. Sure, I mean, when you have high performance mode on, it will run almost at 60 FPS, but even then, there will definitely be frame drops in the beginning and especially in the end of your game. Even occasionally, when you're in the middle of a fight, when there's a lot going on, it will drop to maybe 20 or 15 FPS. Here's what I'll say. Honestly, considering that this is 5 years old, the performance is extremely impressive. I mean, COD Warzone literally came out this year, and this is a 5-year-old phone that is running a Snapdragon 855 Plus. Honestly, I would not expect it to run this well. Instead of telling you, let me just show you. All right, here we go. So basically this is on, I'm pretty sure, pro gamer mode. So this is basically the best that it's gonna run. And let's see how it performs. So far, it's performing pretty good, almost at 60 FPS. However, there are definitely some frame drops here and there. Like I said, I apologize for not the best gaming performance because in terms of me playing, because I have to look through a phone screen, but let's see here. Yeah, as you can see, generally after it loads up, it is almost at a complete 60 FPS. Now, you're watching a 30 FPS video, so you can't exactly tell, but it is definitely at a almost constant 60 FPS. Let's see here. There we go. And when there are some slight frame drops, it really does not affect the performance at all. There we go. But yeah, honestly, it is pretty impressive that a 5-year-old phone could do this. Let's see here. But yeah, as you can see, occasionally there can be some frame drops, but they're really not noticeable, and overall the performance is pretty good. Let's load a bit of a more simpler game. Let's do Geometry Dash Sub-Zero, and let's see how this performs. Alright, so yeah, not too bad. As you can see, there is no frame drops. Well, I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, there's no frame drops. Yeah, really impressive, honestly. I mean, obviously this is a 2D game, but... Oh, there you go. But as you can see, it basically performs at 60 FPS. So yeah, this gaming performance, sure, there are a couple of frame drops here and there in the most highly intensive games, but it is pretty impressive what this phone can do 5 years later. All right, enough about performance. Let's talk about the camera. We've got a triple camera setup on the back. So we've got a 48 megapixel main camera, which is, I think, the exact same as the OnePlus 7 Pro. We got a 16 megapixel ultra wide, which is also the same as the 7 Pro, and a telephoto camera that is 2 times optical zoom and not 3 times like the 7 Pro. However, the advantage with this telephoto is that it is 12 megapixels instead of 8 megapixels on the 7 Pro. Well, I'm gonna show you some photos and some videos, and then after, I'm gonna give my thoughts. But before you do that, if you've really liked this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. But yeah, let's just get started. So now that you've seen the camera performance of the 7T, I think you can kind of see where my opinion is probably going to go, along with your opinion, if that makes sense. Maybe that doesn't make any sense, but anyways, so the camera performance on the OnePlus 7T is good, but it's not great. There are some times where it is generally, sometimes, occasionally great. However, there's also times where the performance is just okay, or sometimes even bad. For instance, let's take this photo right here of the beach. So we have a really great photo here. There is really no problems with this. Overall, this is a fantastic photo, lots of detail. You can basically see all the footprints in the sand. There's no real darkening of the shadows, and HDR is generally pretty good. However, let's just take this photo. This is at first glance an okay photo, but then let's just look into this a bit closer. As you can see, in some cases, you really can't even see the chair, and this is at full brightness, by the way. The colors are totally not accurate at all. This is not what my backyard looks like. It's not this colorful, and sure, color can sometimes be a really good thing, but this is not a pretty color. It's kind of ugly. There's almost this is not like a accurate green. My pool almost looks like there was moss in it or something like that, and this is not the color of the actual pool. And the shadows are really darkened on the tree, and overall there's just way too much contrast. Now moving on to a pretty bad photo. Now obviously, as adorable as my cat is, it really can't save this photo. Once again, at first glance, it might seem okay, but let's zoom in a bit. It is completely blurry, and I tried to take this shot multiple times. These shadows are way too darkened, and this was also a nighttime exposure shot. So you'd think there would be a decent amount of exposure, and also we did have a purple light provided. However, and this has been pretty consistent during nighttime, it's been pretty inconsistent. The front-facing camera also really isn't impressive at all. Not only can it basically just record in 1080p the entire time, but then also the photo quality is just not there. There's no autofocus, the colors are way too red and also way too contrasty, and it's just not an accurate shot. So yes, there can be great photos with this phone, but there can also be equally bad photos. And this was definitely acceptable in 2019. I remember having the 7 Pro, which is a pretty similar camera besides autofocus, which probably would have fixed a few issues with this, but basically the same camera. And overall, yeah, the camera performance at the time, I remember it being pretty good, but in 2024, when you have phones, well, like the phone that I'm recording on right now, the iPhone 14 Plus, that take flagship quality photos, this is not even close to flagship quality. This is basically equivalent to a $200 or $300 phone. So yeah, over the course of the past basically a week that I've had this phone, I've definitely changed my opinion on the camera a lot. Where at first I was saying, oh yeah, it's pretty good. Obviously there's gonna be some times where it's not gonna be so good, but overall it's pretty good. To now saying that it's basically just okay to good. All right, now time for battery life and charging. This OnePlus 7T has a 3800 milliamp hour battery, which may seem pretty small, but actually it's a lot better than you may expect for a 3800 milliamp hour battery. Now, it's not going to break any records, but it does generally get about 5 to 5.5 hours of screen on time, which is perfectly acceptable. And with the charging, you got Warp Charge 30T, which is very speedy and basically charges this up in about 45 minutes. Compared to my 14 Plus, the battery isn't as good as what it seems like. But to be fair, the iPhone 14 Plus has one of the best batteries in the world, so the fact that it even comes somewhat close to it is pretty impressive. All right, time to talk about my final verdict and just my final thoughts and whether I'm gonna be switching to this phone. All right, first things first, my thoughts on this phone, just my final thoughts. First of all, I got this for 75 bucks, and it's an insane deal. It's an absolutely insane deal that I'm so glad that I got this for this price and was able to review this for you guys, because I genuinely think this beats anything that is under about 250 bucks. Not only does it have a top tier display, but it also has top tier performance for its price and completely blows it out the water compared to other phones that are even close to this price. For instance, like the newest Redmi Note phones. Honestly, it's not even close. This is faster. Not only that, but this hasn't really been taken to really that switch to Color OS. This is on Oxygen OS 12, and yes, it does have some Color OS aspects to it, but it still does feel like Oxygen OS. And yes, I did complain a decent amount about the camera and some other aspects, but honestly, it's really not too bad considering what you're getting for this price. Like I said, I got this for 75 bucks. Now, generally, most people probably won't get this for 75 bucks. You'll probably get it for about 100 to 120, which I believe I just recently sold this for about 100. So, and yes, that is actually what I want to talk about. I decided to sell this phone. Yes, I have really loved this phone a lot, but here are the reasons I switched. It's mostly because of the somewhat poor camera performance, as well as the not great speaker performance, and also that the battery life isn't as good as the 14 Plus. However, it also wasn't even that fully. It was also the fact that the annoyance from switching from eSIM to physical SIM is really annoying. I've talked about this in my recent videos, but I am going to move to Oregon, actually tomorrow. And so I was going to say, okay, I want to switch from my iPhone to my OnePlus 7T, and I was basically planning on switching, and I was going to forget all of the aspects of the camera and some other minor complaints that I had, because I genuinely do like Android. However, I'm on T-Mobile, and I'm not an authorized user. So unfortunately, even if I wanted to, first of all, even if I was an authorized user, let's just say, it would take me about 7 to 14 days for me to even get the physical SIM card. Then I'd have to switch out this SIM card for the eSIM, so I'd have to remove the eSIM, and then I would have to find someone to buy my 14 Plus. So yeah, unfortunately, those are all the reasons I'm not switching to the 7T. But it's just because those were the reasons why I didn't switch. Honestly, for, like I said, anyone who's buying a phone for about under 200 bucks, there is no better phone than this, maybe besides the OnePlus 7 Pro. But this is an absolutely amazing phone. I've loved this phone a lot, and I think that for just the general public, this is a fantastic phone. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to smash that like button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.